Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you for listening. I hope this show is something that you'll look forward to checking in with every week. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, Gardening Utah aims to inspire you and keep you in the know of what tasks you should be accomplishing in your yard and meet amazing, informative experts along the way. This show airs on the radio on the weekends here in Utah at 10 a.m. on 860 AM KKAT, and episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. On today's show, we're going to play a little game, or maybe we can call it a therapy session. Either way, we're going to be playing Never Have I Ever Garden Edition. Now look, this has been, by far, the most challenging garden year that I've personally ever had. I am encountering so many things that I've never experienced in all of my years of gardening. And I know it's not just me. Thankfully, a lot of listeners write into me and ask questions, and I'm realizing, okay, same here. Also, the Facebook groups, Utah Gardeners, I'm an admin in that group, and everyone is posting just all of these strange things that we've never really encountered before, or it's never been quite as dramatic. So I asked the listeners, hey, let's play Never Have I Ever. Tell us what it is that you've experienced this year that you either never have as a gardener or you've never seen a particular thing quite as dramatic as this year. So we're going to get into all of that. I'm going to read all of the little posts and comments that our listeners made. And it's hopefully going to be educational because you'll learn, oh, wow, that's happening to me too. Here's what to do about it. I'm also going to bring in some answers from horticulturist Liz Hamilton, who is our resident bug expert on this show, because boy, some issues have gone on this year with that too. So we're going to get into all of that after this. But first, the tip of the week.
860 KKAT. With your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is how to keep your garden going when you're gone. It is vacation time, it's summer, and so many of us are taking time off to get away. And you're taking a little breather from work, but all of these beautiful plants and vegetables and flower beds and houseplants that you've worked so hard to keep beautiful are staring at you in the face, and you're going, how in the world am I going to leave these? Well, I've got just a few tips that might give you some inspiration on what to do. So first of all, get hip to drip, right? Drip irrigation. Honestly, it is a game changer. A little bit of mulch, stock up on some drip irrigation materials, and get a timer or two. Connect it to your outdoor faucet. Really. I mean, vegetable gardens and flower beds are the easiest thing ever to drip irrigate. So just weave the lengths of the drip tape or the leaky pipes through the plants and cover them with mulch. Maybe like a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch. You could do shredded bark, you can do compost, and those will also keep weeds at bay while you're gone. And attach that irrigation system to a timer at your faucet. Set it to turn on early in the mornings, like way early, to reduce evaporation, and you're good to go with those particular flower beds. Now, this is assuming your yard isn't completely massive like mine, which this is kind of, I have to remember that I just have way too much garden space. But that being said, another thing you can do with your container plants. Now, if you're just going to be gone for a couple of days, just give your plants a really good soak and then put them in the shade. Just carry them all, group them together, and put them in the shade. This is, of course, assuming that you don't have some kind of maybe a drip system going into your container plants. So putting them in the shade and just soaking them really, really good will probably be okay for a day or two, of course, depending on the size of the pot. But if you're going to be gone longer, here is my biggest tip, which is a longer term strategy for your containers. Get a kiddie pool and put it in the shadiest spot in your yard Add 1 to 2 inches of water to the pool, maybe a little bit more, and you can set the container plants directly into the kiddie pool. Now, that is assuming that there is drainage at the bottom of your containers, which you always need to have for the healthiest plants anyway. And your plants may do well, depending on how hot it is. They may do well for several days this way without water. So remember the kiddie pool tip of the week, because that's a really good one.
And that's your Gardening Utah tip of the week, brought to you by the Advocates. If you're in an accident, you deserve an advocate. Call 801-355-5550 or visit UtahAdvocates.com. Never miss a tip for your garden and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Okay, before we get into the game of Never Have I Ever Garden Edition 2022, I'm going to tell you a little story. So you can see more on TikTok. If you've got the app called TikTok, you just need to understand what I'm saying by going and looking me up. So you can find me on TikTok. I'm just under my normal name, Jana Francis, okay? I'll put a link to it in the episode notes too, so that you can find me easier. Anyway, so the other day I posted this very quick video. I was super excited because my onions, I planted some Walla Walla onions this year. 120 to be exact. I don't know why I decided to count them when I put them in the ground. I bought the tiny little seeds from Lambert Growers, or not the seeds, but I bought the little starts I bought a pack of Walla Walla and a pack of purple onion. And I was like, where am I going to put this many onions? Because, you have to take them out of the little pot and you have to untangle the roots. And there was a lot. So I ended up counting. I got 180 roughly, I think it was maybe 179 onions total. So the other day, the Walla Walla onions are starting to get ready. I mean, you can tell that they're needing to get picked soon so that I can cure them and all that jazz. But meanwhile, you can really pick an onion fresh pretty much any time. Anytime in the onion's life cycle, you can pick it and eat it fresh. Even if it's small, it's more like a spring onion. But so no big deal. But there's this particular one that was the biggest one in my garden, and it's bigger than my hand. I mean, I could barely get my hand around the onion, which I was super stoked about. And where I plant mine in my raised garden boxes, and I do them along the edges. So I literally just line my garden boxes on the very edge with onions. And then by the time the stuff in the middle, like peppers or tomatoes, start getting bigger, you are pulling the onions about now. And so it's kind of works out perfect. Anyway, so I go out, I'm like, I'm going to pick this onion. And I thought, I'm going to post this on the Gardening Utah Instagram because this one is massive and I'm super proud of it. So all I do, I record like 7 seconds of me grabbing my hand, grabbing the onion and pulling it out of the ground. And then I thought, I'd heard this sound on TikTok. On TikTok, one of the things is you can repurpose other people's sound. And that's kind of like one of the things that you do is you find a funny sound and you overlay it on your video. So I'm actually going to play the sound for you because this is so ironic. And of all people that would understand, it would be people that listen to this show. So this audio is kind of hilarious and it's just ironic. So this is actually the audio over my video.
After 6 weeks, $140 in supplies, and daily watering, we're only 3 to 4 weeks away from enjoying a single 25-cent vegetable from our garden.
Oh, the irony, right? I mean, honestly. And of course, it's just a joke. I mean, it's not literal. He's literally just basically saying that we put so much time and so much effort into our gardens. And, maybe when you pick that very first vegetable, it's a huge rush, but it's like, if you really get down to it, you think, oh, wow, like that's really cheap. As an example, the other day I needed 1 jalapeno and mine weren't quite ready. And I just needed one for some salsa. And so at the store, you get your 1 jalapeno. I usually would grab more. But when I have a plant that's like almost ready to explode with more, I just figured I'll just get one. It was literally 17 cents. So you think through it and it's like, oh my gosh, wow. The amount of effort I put into my jalapeno plants or my pepper plants are insane, right? Daily watering and, anyway, it's just kind of funny. But again, we don't necessarily, people like us, gardeners, we don't necessarily do it to save money. I don't even know that you can save money unless you're gardening at a massive scale or growing really expensive things. I mean, there's so many other reasons, and that's not what this particular show is going to be about, but the health benefits of just, being outside and the stress relief of being in nature and the rush of, knowing you need something to finish your meal or finish cooking your meal. It's like, ooh, got those in the garden, go out and pick something fresh and put it right on the table. Those are a lot of the reasons that, we grow. And another reason that I grow food is because you guys know this about me is I love to grow things that you don't find in the grocery stores. Rare varieties of zucchinis and tomatoes and peppers and winter squash that you just don't find at farmers markets. I do like that there is a lot more. It feels like I do feel like stores are getting a lot more diverse with the things that they're offering. Not everywhere, but in general, if you can, minus zucchini and like one regular tomato, I really can't go to the store and buy the stuff that I grow, easily, that is. I mean, so anyway, I just thought that was funny. But meanwhile, the TikTok goes viral. So at this point in time, I literally have over, my goodness, 286,000 views on that video on TikTok. And my phone, as we speak, the reason I even thought to bring it up is that I had to turn off the notifications on my phone for TikTok because it's going off at such a high speed that it's like every second. It's just ding, 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 comment, like, comment, like, comment, like. And I'm just going, whoa, okay, this is crazy. So anyway, I just thought it was ironic. Obviously, a lot of other people think it's funny too, just with regard to the fact that we put so much time and effort into our gardens, and we may not be necessarily saving money, but is that why we're doing it in the first place, right? So yeah, check it out. It's on TikTok. If you don't follow me there, go do it. I'm going to be posting a lot more of my vegetable garden life over there because, it's kind of fun to share on a different platform. And obviously I do that a lot on the Gardening Utah Instagram as well. So if you're not following me there on Gardening Utah, actually you can see a tour of all my vegetables and my vegetable garden that I did just the other night. So I went live on Instagram at the Gardening Utah page. So just look up Gardening Utah. And I did I intended to just show my raised garden box, my pepper boxes, my death pepper box. I have one box that's nothing but hot peppers that if you mishandle them, you're going to be in pain. Everything from Carolina Reaper, Trinidad Yellow Scorpion, Scotch bonnets, red habaneros, you name it. If it's super hot and you shouldn't actually ingest it, I'm growing it in my death pepper box. Anyway, and lots of other peppers in fun varieties, everything from sweet to flavorful and that kind of a thing. But yeah, so there's a little live tour of my garden and how things are growing over on Instagram. I showed my my new raised garden boxes that I started this year just for my squash. They're only one level up because squash really don't love to be in raised garden boxes, at least from my experience. So I showed all of those and all the just different rare squash and things that I'm growing right now, and my cucumber patches and all that kind of stuff. So kind of fun to go check out. And speaking of mentioning that, never have I ever, let's get into it because it kind of relates with my Instagram live, because I also showed my fans on that page the absolute horror time I've had this year growing tomatoes. Now, if you have tomatoes in your garden, it's very likely that you have lost at least one plant, or if you're like me, you've lost over half. So never have I ever, in my entire gardening history, I've never even really lost one tomato plant that I can ever recall losing. I've been lucky. I mean, sure, maybe I'll have one that's not super healthy or not doing as well. Maybe I'll get a little blossom end rot here and there from irregular watering, or, maybe we had a heat snap or whatever. But never have I ever lost one tomato plant. Nonetheless, so this year I have lost over 15 tomato plants, which is over half the crop that I planted this year. It has been so sad for me because if you've listened to most of the 77 episodes of this show, you know that I am really passionate about tomatoes and heirloom varieties that you can't find in the store, and most especially my precious Italian tomatoes that I use for sauce, and I can all fall. I make incredible tomato sauce to last the whole rest of the next year in the winter, and I can San Marzano's whole for pizza sauce because I've got a outdoor pizza oven and we make a lot of fresh pizzas, and it's just not the same without fresh San Marzanos. And typically I have 6 San Marzano plants. That gets us through kind of a good year of, canned San Marzanos. This year I'm down to 1. So I'm super, super sad about that. And it gets to the point where once a plant dies off, it's just too late. There's no way to, just plant another seed and hope for the best. The growing season, really at the end of the day, we've only got August, September, and in October, you never know what's going to happen. Usually everything's frozen by mid-October. I remember picking tomatoes on Halloween once, and I remember picking tomatoes on my mom's birthday, which is mid-October. And sometimes they're frozen by then, and sometimes they're not frozen till Halloween, but usually it's mid-October when we're losing our crops. So, at least in Mid-Salt Lake Valley. So that being said, I'm really sad about this. Now, what is going on? You're probably wondering. So how you know it's happening? Let's start there. If you have one tomato that just it doesn't start. It just stops growing. Doesn't necessarily look dead, but it just is smaller than the others. Then you start noticing it's not flowering out and it's not catching up with the others in any way. And then it kind of starts turning like a lime green and the leaves start to curl. That's what this looks like. And when you notice it, there's no going back. There's no helping it. It's done. It's over. It's gonzo. It's time to pull the tomato, unfortunately. So at first, they didn't really know what in the world was going on. And, it's not. And again, I first thought it was just me, and it's not. It's almost every backyard, tomato person that plants a lot of tomatoes and have lost a lot of tomatoes. I know that it's been a problem with farms. And so this is the real deal. Now, there's kind of 2 schools of thought, and I'm sure that by the time you listen to this, they may have figured it out. They is in like USU. I believe they might have determined it's some variety of curly top transmitted through the leafhopper. But when I first started noticing it happening in my yard is when we had that ridiculous sort of heat and wind. It was like a full week of just mind-bending wind, constant, with 100 to 103 degree temps. And that was early in the growing season. We're looking at like mid-June when this was going on. And that is not good for vegetables that are starting to get their footing and growing their roots. And if they're focused on trying to retain moisture in their leaves, it pulls away from the roots entirely, right? And then maybe we start getting better conditions, and then the roots aren't established enough, and the tomato's like, I cave, I give up. And or this leaf or the curly top. So it's one or the other, or maybe it's a combination of both with many of our places. And I know I'm not explaining it accurately the way USU would. So, if you really are interested, I'm sure that they have resources on their Facebook page. And it's probably going to be updated by the time this podcast comes out with exactly what it is. But for now, it's just like mystery freaking tomato COVID. So anyway, it's been devastating. And so never have I ever lost a tomato until this year. All those little baby seeds that I started with so much pride and joy in late March, many of them died. Now, here is something really, really crazy. So I, at one point, found a packet of tomato seeds. I believe my mother-in-law gave them to me. It just happened to be in her garage, and they were from 1988. I just thought one of these days I'm going to plant these and just see what happens, right? And this year was that year. So when I planted all my tomato seeds, I was like, oh, I might not get germination out of these, but I'm just going to try for fun. So I started 6 of the seeds because I figured I'd have about, maybe 1 germinate. And I actually had 2 germinate. It's a Rutgers variety of tomato. Again, seeds from 1988. Would you believe that those 2 tomatoes are perfect? They haven't gotten it. And so I'm kind of blown away. So I don't know if there's any correlation whatsoever, but it is interesting to me that a seed from 1988, those are the ones that make it through this crazy tomato problem. Wow, I wonder why. Maybe they're resistant to it because they're an older variety. I have literally no idea. And also it could just be very coincidental. You never know. I mean, I'm literally down to just 2 Rutgers varieties, and I have, also anything in my container plants. I typically put cherry tomatoes in containers, and I put them around my yard in different places so that anytime I'm in a different corner of the yard, I can snack while I'm watering on cherry tomatoes. And none of my cherries have died, but they're not doing amazing either. But I'm just down to 1 Goldsman Italian, 1 San Marzano, and 2 Rutgers varieties, and the rest I had to go and buy from a store. And those so far, 4 out of 5 are still alive. But the ones I bought, everyone I bought earlier in the year from Wasatch Community Gardens or Lambert Grower, anywhere that I regularly buy a lot of my vegetables, they're all gone. All of them. Every single last tomato. And again, most that I started myself. So sad year for tomatoes. Thank you for listening to my massive diatribe about tomatoes, because I tell you what, it's been hurting my heart. So this was a little bit of good therapy. So I appreciate that. So right after this, we're going to get into your Never Have I Evers. We'll be right back here on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah. It's the Gardening Utah Proven Winners Color Choice Shrub of the Week. Here's Cameron Alcott with Progressive Plants.
Well, speaking of vacations, Cameron Alcott is on one this week, enjoying himself down in beautiful Cancun, Mexico. So meanwhile, I am here to tell you the Proven Winner Color Choice Shrub of the Week. So this is a fun one because I got to pick it out. This is the beautiful Hydrangea Paniculata Quickfire. Now, what I love about Quickfire is it's a hydrangea that blooms about a month earlier than any other panicle hydrangea. The flowers open pure white, and then they start to turn a pink, sort of a dark rosy pink in the fall. And the blooms are produced on new wood, which means you will see flowers even after a really harsh winter. And unlike other panicle hydrangeas, Quickfire has an excellent fall foliage for one last hurrah right before winter. It is an excellent choice for a less formal landscape. I personally am obsessed with it. I love mine. And Progressive Plants has many of them right now. So I'm going to be stocking up on a few for the front of my yard. And meanwhile, I hope you do too. The link to check it out is in the episode notes of the podcast.
Look for the Proven Winners white containers at progressiveplants.com or at your local garden center.
We are supported by progressiveplants.com. All things plants help you plan your perfect yard. Visit progressiveplants.com today.
She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and today we are tackling Never Have I Ever Garden Edition. Listen, this last 2 months has been so hot. I mean, literally, wasn't July one of our hottest Julys on record, I believe, and it's just really difficult for plants to do well in this kind of weather, especially when you add in wind and all the other things we've been dealing with here in the state of Utah. So again, all of our listeners and all of us gardeners are experiencing things we never have before. So I already told you about my tomatoes, and I'm going to start reading what some of you guys posted. So Carrie Polson says, never have I ever had a dozen cucumber plants and another dozen squash totally decimated by pill bugs. Oh boy, I'll tell you what, Carrie, I've noticed pill bugs eating my radish roots of all things. Now, if you're wondering what pill bugs are, some people call them potato bugs, some people call them doodle bugs, but technically I believe they're called armadillo-dilly. I'm going to butcher this. Okay, this is according to Wikipedia right here. Here's how you pronounce what they're technically called.
Armadillidiidae.
Armadillidiidae. Okay, there you have it. So are pill bugs beneficial? Well, technically they're part of nature's garbage disposal system, really. They mostly eat decaying plant matter, they eat rotten vegetation, and they're really, really good in the compost pile. Okay, the next never have I ever is from Paula. She said, never have I ever not had pumpkins for my grandchildren at Halloween. So I asked her why, and she said that she just has very few female blossoms. All of her blossoms have dried up and fallen off even before they opened. And now it's so late in the season, she'll be amazed if she gets anything at all. I'm experiencing that with 2 of my pumpkins as well, where the foliage is just going crazy and lots of male blossoms, but no female blossoms so far. Okay, Katie Wortman says, never had I ever had squash bugs. Never have I ever had earwigs and pill bugs destroy so many plants. And never have I been successful with bell peppers. Yeah, so squash bugs. We are going to get into squash bugs with Liz Hamilton at the end of this episode because there are so many people that have been talking about squash bugs. It has been a massive problem this year. So we'll get into that with Liz in just a few minutes. So next up is Katie Sutton says she is never had any of the following: enough earwigs to fill a bucket to almost kill off my perennial herbs in my backyard, beet leafhopper grasshoppers carrying curly top virus to some of my tomatoes, another bright green grasshopper species that literally ate all my potato greens and emerged from the plants in the hundreds, squash bugs and their eggs, tomato blight, some strange thing that's killing my front perennial bed slowly, rust disease on my hollyhocks. Yeah, I had that this year as well. And whatever it is that's happening to the rest of my tomatoes, they look awful, and no one at any local nursery has seen it before. That's what we talked about earlier. The worst part is this is also the first year I grew everything from seed. Oh no, that's so sad. I can relate, Katie. I worked so hard to keep it all alive and healthy. Yeah, I can relate to that. Okay, Sarah says, never have I ever had 4 tomato plants completely cut off at the lower stem by something and fully disappear. This year has had a rough start. Yeah, I lost a few like that, cucumbers that very way. Another person says, Cammie says, never have I ever had squash plants in Utah refuse to produce even a single flower for me. Wow. Oh, wow. Abby Smith says, never have I had hail the size of marbles damage my pumpkin plants and had every single tomato that managed to grow get picked before its time by my 3-year-old twins. Oh, no. Well, Abby, I don't think there's any pest control for the latter one. Paula Spears says, I don't know if this counts, but I never thought that I would be so excited to take out grass from my yard. I'm currently localscaping and being very intentional with my lawn versus activity zones, gathering areas, paths, and planting beds. My yard is having a beautiful transformation. I didn't know it could change for the better by removing grass. Well, Paula, Cynthia B. will love to hear this. Sarah Scott says, never have I ever put on the equivalent of a hazmat suit in the middle of the night and go full apocalyptic doomsday with diatomaceous earth in the last-ditch effort to kill squash bugs. Oh my gosh. Also, called out of work to wrap my hands in duct tape to terminate their remaining eggs. Known a beneficial nematode was even a thing, let alone release 5 million of them to my garden to kill off grubs while screaming, "Release the Kraken!" 4, had neighbors stop by with brownies to check on my mental health because now I'm the lady who rambles incoherently while beheading bugs. Oh my gosh, Sarah, we need to be best friends. 5, had every single peony and hydrangea plant die on the exact same day. Lush and green one day, crunchy and brown and dead the next. Whoa. I don't know what that could be. That sounds chemical. 6, had 2 tomato plants produce not one single flower, let alone a tomato. And 7, seen such success with my cucumbers. Thank God something is thriving. Right? It's been a great year for my cucumbers too. 8, used Facebook gardening groups as a support group. It's been a tough year and I'm grateful for everyone's humor and support. We are a united front. Well, Sarah, that's hilarious and amazing. I'm going to reply to your comment right after this show. That was awesome. Okay, Allison Pullen says, I've never had squash bugs, never had to replant my cucumbers and beans 3 times because earwigs kept eating the seedlings. I hear you on that. Lost tomato plants. She's lost 6 out of 70. Wow, that's a good ratio, though, I'll tell you. Had earwigs and pill bugs destroy my zinnias. Gall, many people talking about pill bugs here. On the flip side, never had watermelons actually grow to a promising size. Never had pepper plants grow so quickly or had so many pumpkins on the vine. So Allison's having good luck with pumpkins. Kind of interesting. My peppers are incredibly happy, other than I do have some kind of random predator going after them. But I think it's my chickens. Okay, well, look, there are so many comments here about squash bugs. I mean, one after the other of people losing squash plants overnight. They just literally dissipate into nothing because of the squash bugs. So we are going to go to Liz Hamilton right now to talk about how to prevent those.
So when I worked in public gardening and we were growing food, squash bugs were the devil, right? And so I always, similarly to like using bait for other critters, I say, assume you're going to get them, treat early, treat often, like greater peachtree borer, same issue, right? Like assume it's coming and don't wait until you see damage, because by the time you see damage, it's usually more out of control than you even realize.
Yeah.
And so I always like when I worked public gardening, I would just pre-treat.
Okay.
And so like a carbaryl based 7 affects squash bug nymphs, not adults.
Okay.
Or at least not adults significantly. And so the way the squash bug life cycle works is that the adults overwinter in debris. So I've seen people will post the advice like, oh, you've got to like get all this stuff up because the eggs overwinter in the soil and this, that, and the other. And that's not accurate. The eggs don't overwinter anywhere. It's the adults, mature adults overwintering in debris, which is why you see every now and then somebody will post something like, there's a squash bug in my house or whatever online. Or you find one, like you're cleaning up leaf debris in, March or something when there shouldn't be any squash bugs around, and all of a sudden you uncover a couple of them. Yeah. So they're in the same family with, like Iranian firebugs and box elder bugs and like the elm seed bugs. And so what they do is they cluster together, they find a warm spot and they overwinter in that little area. And so if you know you have the original control begins with removing debris from your garden before when the season ends. There's some debate on this because you're disturbing the larvae of like butterflies and native bees and things like that. But also when you allow for those things, that space to overwinter, you also allow for bad bugs to overwinter as well. And so it's that toss of like, which one do you want? And so for squash bugs, which we're talking about specifically, removing debris from your garden area at the end of the season, especially if you had an outbreak, is going to be key. So don't chop and drop all your stuff and let them lay fallow in the garden for the winter. If you have a compost pile, make sure your compost pile is getting hot enough to burn and things so that they're not using that as cover through the winter. Things like old boards laying around flat on the ground is just perfect for them to get up underneath. If you have a flower bed that's right next to your vegetable bed, and you do the same thing, and you let all those flowers and you stay up all winter long, and you're not cutting any of that down, or you're letting leaf material from falling leaves in the trees come down, and you use that over your garden bed for the winter. It's all places where adult squash bugs will hide to live through the winter, emerge, and then begin to mate and lay eggs as soon as it's warm enough. So there's that. Keep it in mind. You're not trying to eliminate eggs. You're trying to eliminate adults from overwintering anywhere near stuff. Then squash bugs fly. So people, in a regular backyard, you'll hear this thing like, just rotate your crops, move your squash from one side of the yard to the other, and then you won't have an issue. Well, they overwintered in your yard. They're going to find you. They're adults and they have wings. So you're not waiting for nymphs to emerge and crawl onto your plants. You're waiting for adults to come out when it's warm, figure out where you've planted your stuff, and fly to them. They know exactly where to go, just like the cabbage moth butterfly. They emerge and they know right where to find the cabbage. They're not deterred by anything else. I have heard people say things like, well, I planted my nasturtiums in with my squash and that deterred them. I've never seen anything that indicates, like on a scientific level, that that's working. But if you think, and I've seen people say, I've never had a squash bug and I do this every year. Well, maybe you just never had a squash bug. Right. In my yard, in my backyard, I have actually never had a squash bug. I've never had a squash bug infestation, never had one show up. But professionally, I get them everywhere. And I've gone to people's houses and seen them in their yards, but I have never had a squash bug. My neighbors plant squash all over this particular, knock on wood, neighborhood. No one in my neighborhood has ever had a squash bug. So, wow. Yes. So for whatever that's worth. And then I manage a donation garden down around the corner at one of the local churches, full of squash bugs everywhere. They're not far away, but no one's finding me. So, wow. And I have never treated because I've never gotten them, but the day that I get them, it'll be too late, right? I should have treated ahead of time, which is what I did when I was managing gardens professionally. So, when you start the treatment, start with something that's going to have a residual. So I've seen people say, I spray with neem oil. Well, that's great if you actually hit the insect, but neem oil doesn't do anything for you to protect the plant in between sprayings. Same with soapy water, things like that. Like you'll kill insects on contact. Horticultural oil, you'll kill insects on contact, but does nothing for you in the meantime. So you could come by in the morning and spray with neem or soapy water or horticultural oil, and there's nothing on your plant. And in the afternoon, that's the squash bug flies in, lands on your plant, proceeds to do its business, start feeding, laying eggs, and you missed your window of opportunity, and now you have an infestation. And so you need something with a residual, a pesticide with a residual. And so things like that are like Captain Jack's dead bug spray, like spinosad. And you'll want to read the label to see how often you can spray a season and how long you should go in between spraying. So some sprays will say you have to wait 14 days before you can spray again. Some sprays will say 3 days. Some sprays will say 7. It depends on the concentration and what you're using. And if you're mixing your own concentration, you can see that on the label too. If you're mixing your own at 4%, it's this. If you're mixing your own at 2%, it's this. So as with any pesticide, always read the label and know what you're spraying. But so there's synthetic, 7 works until they're adults, and then it doesn't. Yeah. So it helps with nymphs. Spinosad can help with things. Permethrin works pretty good. So there's a 7 that's permethrin based. There's a 7 that's carbaryl based. So you're just kind of watching to see, and all of those have spinosad, all of them have residuals. Okay. And so it should be on the label, and the bug itself should be on the label. If the bug itself is not on the label, it may not be working. Got it. Okay. So something to think about is if your label doesn't specifically say controls X, it may not be controlling it. Yeah. So something like, so same with and all of those when you're spraying preventatively, codling moth, greater peach tree borer, and squash bugs, I spray for all of those similarly. Like you're spraying preventative because you're going to get it. unless you're like me and you think you're never going to get them at your house because you've been there for 10 years and you've never gotten one. But you should be spraying if you've ever had one, and spray before you see damage, because where there's one, there's many, and they know where you're at. And then you can also look at resistant varieties. And so some varieties are more susceptible to damage and are more attractive to them than others. So Cucurbita maxima, so that's a pumpkin, like a fuzzy pumpkin. So that's like your Dill's Atlantic Giant, your Hubbard squash in particular is a huge attractor for them. And then some of your other cucurbitas look like your Cucurbita moschatos. So that's like your butternut squash is also very highly attractive.
Yes.
And you'll get them on your zucchini, and you'll get them on your pie pumpkins. And so those are Cucurbita pepos. But your Cucurbita maximas and your Cucurbita moschatos are going to be the ones that are highly susceptible and that you should be really watching. And I have never actually planted any Cucurbita maximas or moschatos at my house because I'm afraid it will attract them from miles around, whereas my zucchini and my pie pumpkins do not. And so...
Oh, interesting. Because I always plant a Hubbard and a big banana squash and a butternut, and they're,
covered.
They get
banana squash is also, that's a maxima as well. Yeah, they get totally covered because they're preferred. And another way you look at sometimes organic gardening is they plant what is called trap crops. And so you plant a desirable on the outside of your garden edge. And then when they get infested with something, you go through and you spray that with a killer, or, you dump soapy water on it and try to kill everything that you can on that. And so Hubbard squash and banana squash are typically trap crops for organic gardeners for squash bug. And they plant, 15, 20, 30 feet inside away from those things on the outside. They plant their zucchinis and everything else away from them so that they don't get infested like the others.
I've never heard that term, trap crop. I love it.
Yeah. So like people will grow Brussels sprouts near their kale and their collards and things like that because Brussels sprouts attract more aphids than the others. And so they'll use Brussels sprouts as a trap crop, and then they go through and slowly kill bugs on the trap crops and spray the trap crops because they're lessening the population that way versus having to spray what they're going to eat.
Wow.
And so, so you can use trap crops too for certain things. Yeah, if you have the space, it doesn't really work if they're all in the same yard.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just going to go where they're going to go. So sometimes these things work better in like open field plantings, but possible.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for damage for squash bugs and you have a Cucurbita maxima planted, that's where it's going to start. That's where the infestation begins.
Yep. And that's exactly it's a pumpkin where I found a large pumpkin just the other day when I saw my first signs of squash bugs. And there's nothing worse than when those eggs hatch and those little nymphs are just, oh man, brutal.
Yeah. They look like spiders.
Yeah, they definitely do. But I definitely go after the baby or the eggs with duct tape. But it's time consuming, and you miss them. You might not get them all, so you really you have to attack it at all angles, kind of like slugs.
Yeah, and I will say people are always nervous about spraying the cucurbits because you have squash bees that pollinate most of your cucurbits, and people are nervous about squash bees, and they're a native. Also, protected. And you don't want to be spraying into the blooms. And so when you do spray, if you're anything, whether it's, organic or otherwise, when you're treating, you want to treat late in the evening after all the blossoms have closed, or really early in the morning before all the blossoms have opened. And you're spraying the outside of that flower instead of right into where the pollen and the nectar is for pollination. And when you do spray, you don't need to spray the entire plant. Like I've seen people go by and just spray the tops of the leaves on a really big zucchini or something like that. That does nothing for you. The squash bugs aren't up there. So what you're trying to spray is like main vines and where the vine the crown of the vine sits from the soil. And you've seen advice where people will say, make a big bucket of soapy water and dump it on the crown of the plant, and then you can watch the squash bugs run, and then you can smash as many as you can get your hands on. It's the same, but you wouldn't just like spray the leaves and hope squash bugs came out. So it's the same principle. When you do spray, where you will see damage, where they will accumulate, congregate, mate, feed, is right there at the base of the plant. So when you're spraying in there. Get your wand down inside to spray for that, and make sure you're doing it when pollinators are not active.
Got it. I love it. Well, Liz, I can't believe we're out of time, but I love having you on the show, and this has been really fun, and I hope you come back again very, very soon.
Yeah, I always enjoy it. Thank you so much for having me.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.
We are supported by ProgressivePlants.com. They are the experts that the professionals go to for all things plants. Progressive Plants has over 1 million plants at their 100-acre nursery up in Copperton. And you can shop those plants from right at home at ProgressivePlants.com. They are your neighbors next door and experts at helping you choose the perfect and unique plants that will thrive in your location. Progressive Plants is passionate about helping homeowners, expert gardeners, novices alike choose the correct plant for your soil. They don't just grow plants, they know plants. Let Progressive Plants help you today. Just go to ProgressivePlants.com and check out their wide selection. You can also go to the Design tab and look at the expert designers that they have that can help you plan your perfect yard. Visit ProgressivePlants.com today. Download the mobile app and make it easy to shop on the go. Now it's your turn. Discover new selections and unbeatable prices. Shop Steals.com and start saving today. Steals.com, Steals.com.